Mara Hughes never thought she'd see her own reflection and flinch. It wasn't her face that scared her, it was the look in her eyes. The coldness that didn't used to be there. A year ago, she was the kind of woman who brought soup to sick neighbors and fed stray cats in the alley. Now, she was different. And the worst part, she wasn't sure when it had started. It was the summer heat that made the air heavy in her small apartment, the kind that sticks to your skin. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the unopened letter in front of her. Her boss had left it in her mailbox that morning, marked confidential. Her hands itched to tear it open, but something told her she already knew it was bad news. Mara worked at a juvenile detention center, a job she'd once loved. She'd been drawn to it because she believed in second chances. She'd smile at the kids, ask about their families, talk to them like they were people, not cases. But over the past few months, something had shifted. Their eyes, once full of defensiveness, began to feel like mirrors. They didn't just reflect. They probed. They saw her kindness and mistook it for weakness. She picked up the letter. Her hands shook, though she wasn't sure if it was fear or anger. The first line hit hard. Your recent conduct has raised concerns. The paper blurred as her heart pounded. She thought of last week. The fights between two boys in the yard. The way she'd stepped in not with calm words, but with a grip so tight one of them yelped in pain. She had told herself it was necessary, that he deserved it. But that wasn't what her training manual said. And it definitely wasn't what Mara, the old Mara, would have done.
The truth was, Mara hadn't been sleeping well. Every night, she replayed scenes from work shouts, slammed doors, the sound of fists against flesh. At first, she pitied the kids, the ones born into chaos. But pity had a way of rotting when exposed to too much reality. The stories she heard every day weren't just sad, they were sick. And the more she heard, the more she felt the lines between right and wrong blur. Her phone buzzed. It was her friend Nicole, a fellow officer at the center. Nicole, you hear about Marcus? Mara, no, Nicole, stabbed a guy in the shower, shank from a toothbrush. Mara, is he alive? Nicole, barely. Mara closed her eyes. Marcus was 16. He'd once drawn her a picture of a dog because she'd mentioned liking them. She had smiled then, thinking maybe he had a shot at a different life. Now he was just another statistic. She put down the phone and walked to the window. Outside, the world looked normal: kids on bikes, an old man walking his dog, sunlight hitting the cracked pavement. But she felt miles away from it all. Her life had become a loop of violence, suspicion, and control. And it was changing her. That evening, she poured herself a glass of wine, something she rarely did on work nights. She took a long sip and stared at her reflection in the black screen of the TV. Her mind replayed an incident from 2 months ago, a boy named Isaiah who had spit in her face during a search. Without thinking, she had shoved him against the wall, hard enough to hear the breath leave his lungs. She'd told herself it was about control, about safety. But deep down, she knew there had been satisfaction in it. A flicker of power. Was this how it started? Not with grand acts of cruelty, but with small moments where the line bent and you didn't bend it back. The letter still lay on the table. She picked it up again, this time reading to the end. She was being placed under review. One more incident, and she could lose her job. Instead of fear, she felt something else rise in her chest: defiance. If they wanted to watch her, fine. But maybe they should be watching the kids instead. The ones who lied without blinking. The ones who laughed about hurting people. The ones who, if given the chance, might hurt her too. She set the letter down and stared at the wall clock, the second hand ticking steadily. She didn't realize it yet, but this was the moment the balance inside her began to tip. The review period at work didn't change the chaos. It just made Mara more aware of how closely she was being watched. Every shift, she felt the eyes of the supervisors tracking her movements, waiting for her to slip again. It made her cautious. At first, on Tuesday morning, the smell of bleach filled the corridors. A fight had broken out in the showers the night before, and the janitors had been scrubbing since dawn. Mara walked past a group of boys slouched against the wall, their laughter low and sharp. They weren't laughing at anything funny. Mara had learned to recognize the sound of cruelty disguised as humor. Isaiah was among them, the same boy who had spit in her face 2 months ago. He caught her eye and smirked, a slow curl of the lips that told her he remembered and that he wasn't sorry. "Morning, Officer Hughes," he said, his voice mockingly polite. She kept walking. The old Mara would have ignored the bait, but now it lodged in her chest like a thorn. She could feel it there, itching every time she passed him. Later, she found out Isaiah had stolen from another kid's commissary account, taking his weekly allowance of snacks and toiletries by threatening him. The victim was too scared to report it, but a guard overheard. Policy said Mara should fill out a report and let administration handle it. But she knew what would happen. Isaiah would be written up, lose privileges for a week, then go back to doing the same thing. The rules weren't working. That afternoon, she cornered Isaiah in the supply room when no cameras were on them. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she said quietly. He shrugged, eyes glinting. Better than being stupid. The insult was nothing new. But the tone, calm, confident, certain she wouldn't touch him, sparked something in her. She stepped forward, close enough that her presence blocked his way out. "Here's the thing," she said. "You mess with people on my watch, there are consequences." He tilted his head. "Like what?" "You gonna hit me?" She didn't, but she grabbed his wrist hard enough that his smirk faltered. She leaned in and whispered, "Test me again and see what happens." It wasn't in the manual. It wasn't in the job description. But the satisfaction watching his eyes flicker with uncertainty was like a rush. She let him go and walked away without another word. That night, Mara told herself it was nothing. Just a scare tactic, but she also noticed Isaiah kept his distance after that. No more comments, no more smirks. And it worked better than the official channels ever had. The success made her uneasy. She poured herself a glass of water and sat at her kitchen table, the same place she'd read the review letter. She thought about how simple it had been. One rule bent, one moment of pressure, and the problem vanished. Wasn't that the point? To keep control? To make the place safer? Nicole called just before bed. "Nicole, you hear about the new kid, Jamal?" "Mara, no. What's his deal?" Nicole, armed robbery. Says he's 15, but I swear he looks 12. Mara sighed. Another story, another name on the roster. But she didn't expect to meet Jamal the very next day in a way that would test her more than Isaiah had. Jamal was small, wiry, with a mop of curls that fell into his eyes. He didn't talk much, but when he did, it was usually to ask questions about the rules, about when he could call his mom, about what time meals were. At first, Mara thought he was harmless. But on the third day, during lunch, she saw him slip a sharpened piece of metal into his pocket when he thought no one was looking. She froze. It wasn't a weapon yet, but it could be. Her mind raced. Protocol said to call for backup, secure the area, and confiscate the object. But she was standing just a few feet away, and he hadn't seen her yet. If she called it in, there would be paperwork, maybe even an investigation into how he got it. That could mean hours of scrutiny. Or she could just take it from him, quietly, directly. She chose the second option. Walking up behind him, she tapped his shoulder. "What's in your pocket?" He turned, startled. "Nothing." Her voice hardened. "Give it to me." For a second, she thought he might refuse. But then he slowly pulled out the small, jagged piece of metal, a fragment from a broken chair leg. She held out her hand and he placed it in her palm. "You could hurt someone with this," she said. His eyes darted to the side. "Or they could hurt me." Something in his voice soft, almost trembling cut through her anger. She slipped the metal into her own pocket. "You're better off without it," she said, then turned and walked away. That evening, she didn't file a report. She told herself it was for Jamal's sake, that he didn't need another mark against his record. But she also knew the truth. It was easier for her this way. Less attention. Less trouble. It was her second compromise in a week, and just like before, it worked. No fights, no injuries, no questions from her supervisors. But as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she wondered, was she protecting Jamal, or was she protecting herself? The answer didn't come, but the unease stayed. By the end of the week, Mara could feel it. The air in the detention center had shifted. It wasn't just her perception. The kids noticed, too. They watched her differently now. Less like a guard to test and more like someone who could tilt the balance of their day with a look. Isaiah kept his head down. Jamal stayed out of trouble. And Mara's supervisors, distracted by a string of incidents in another wing, barely glanced in her direction. It should have felt like control. Instead, it felt like standing on a frozen lake, hearing faint cracks beneath her boots. Nicole was the first to notice something was off. "Nicole, you've been quiet lately." Mara, "Just tired." Nicole, "Tired or different?" Mara didn't answer. She didn't want to talk about the compromises she'd made, or how much easier the days felt when she bent the rules just enough to make them work for her. It was during Friday's rec time that the next test came. The gym was loud basketballs thudding against the floor, sneakers squeaking, the shouts of boys who didn't know how to play without trash talk. Mara stood near the wall, scanning the room. That's when she saw it. A bigger kid, Rondo, had Jamal pinned against the lockers, one hand gripping his shirt. Rondo was trouble 16 going on 30, all muscle and no patience. Protocol would be to blow the whistle, call for backup, and separate them by the book. But Mara didn't reach for the whistle. She crossed the gym quickly, stepping between them. "Back off," she told Rondo. He grinned, slow and deliberate. "Why? We're just talking." Her eyes flicked to Jamal. His face was pale, but he didn't speak. "I said back off." Something in her tone must have landed, because Rondo let go. But instead of sending him to the supervisor's office, Mara leaned in close and said, low enough for only him to hear, "You touch him again, and you'll regret it." Rondo's grin faded. "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." She walked away without writing him up. No paperwork. No official record. Just her words, hanging in the air like a warning. That night, she replayed it in her mind. No one had gotten hurt. Jamal was safe. But she also knew she had given Rondo something to think about, and not in the way the system intended. The next day, Nicole pulled her aside. "Nicole, you've been handling things differently." "Mara, differently how?" "Nicole, you don't follow the playbook anymore. You cut corners. You keep things off the record." Mara's pulse quickened. "You saying you're gonna report me?" Nicole hesitated. "No, I'm saying I get it. Sometimes the rules don't work. But you keep doing this, it'll change you." The words hit harder than Mara expected. Change her? As if she hadn't already changed. On Monday morning, she learned just how quickly a ripple could become a wave. Isaiah had been caught with contraband and improvised lockpick. When questioned, he told the staff, "I didn't make it. Someone gave it to me." He didn't say Mara's name, but her stomach nodded. She hadn't given him anything. But she knew why the suspicion could land on her now, because she had started bending rules. And people noticed when you weren't as clean as you used to be. Her supervisor called her into the office. The room smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. "Mara, we're looking into this situation with Isaiah," he said. "You were on duty in his wing yesterday. Anything unusual?" She kept her face neutral. "No, just the usual." He studied her for a long moment. "If you know something, now's the time to say it." "I don't." It was the truth. But the lie was in the omission. She didn't say how she had been handling Isaiah lately, or the way she'd cornered him in the supply room last week. She left the office with her heart pounding. The lake beneath her feet was cracking faster now. That evening, Nicole texted her. "Nicole, you're not gonna believe this. Isaiah's in solitary. Mara, why?" "Nicole, they think he was planning an escape." Mara set her phone down, staring at the wall. She had wanted him out of her way. Now he was gone, locked up, alone, under suspicion for something she didn't even know if he'd done. And for the first time, she felt a twinge of guilt that didn't fade. The next morning, Jamal approached her in the cafeteria. "You got Isaiah sent to the hole?" he asked quietly. Mara shook her head. "Wasn't me. You scared him. That's why he's in there." Rondo says you're not like the other guards. Says you make your own rules. The words landed heavy, not like the other guards. She wanted to say it wasn't true, but she didn't. That night, lying in bed, she thought about Nicole's warning. It'll change you. She had started this job believing in second chances, in fairness. Now she was making threats, keeping secrets, and cutting corners without a second thought. Maybe it wasn't the kids who were changing under her watch. Maybe it was her. The news about Isaiah's solitary confinement spread fast through the detention center. By Wednesday, the tension was a living thing in the air, quiet, watchful, waiting to erupt. Mara could feel it in the way conversation stopped when she walked past, in the way kids studied her with new calculation. Rondo was the worst. His eyes followed her every move. Not mocking, not challenging, just measuring. Like he was figuring out where the cracks were. That morning she found Jamal sitting alone in the day room, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. She sat down across from him. "You okay?" He shrugged. "Rondo says he's gonna get me." Mara felt a hot pulse of anger. Why? Because you made him look weak. Jamal's voice was quiet, but the fear was real. He says next time he won't stop. The old Mara would have filed an incident report, put Jamal under protective watch. But the old Mara had learned those protections were just paperwork that didn't stop fists. "Stay in the rec yard when there are cameras," she told him. "And if he corners you, yell loud enough for me to hear." Jamal gave her a small nod, but she could tell he didn't believe that would save him. The attack came 2 days later. It was during lunch, the cafeteria buzzing with the usual clatter of trays and shouted jokes. Mara was stationed near the serving line when she heard the crash metal chair legs scraping across the floor, the sound of bodies hitting tile. By the time she got there, Rondo had Jamal on the ground, one knee pressed to his chest. His fist was raised. Mara didn't think. She grabbed Rondo by the back of his shirt and yanked him off so hard he stumbled. He spun on her, rage in his face. "You want to hit someone?" She said, voice low but shaking. "Try me." He laughed, but it wasn't real laughter. It was a mask for the fact that she was in his space, close enough to shove him again. Then she did something she hadn't planned. She stepped into him, crowding his personal space until his back hit the wall. Her hand pressed against his chest, not a shove this time, but a hold, pinning him in place. The cafeteria noise dulled in her ears. She could feel his heartbeat under her palm, fast but steady. He didn't flinch. "You so much as breathe wrong toward him again," she said, "and I'll make sure you don't walk for a week." The words were out before she could think about them. When she let go, Rondo just stared at her, his jaw tight. He didn't make a scene. He just walked away. Later, in the staff restroom, Mara splashed cold water on her face. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the rush. She had crossed something invisible, and the power in it was intoxicating. Nicole found her an hour later. Nicole. What happened in the cafeteria? Mara. Rondo jumped Jamal. I stopped it. Nicole. I heard you didn't just stop it. I heard you got in his face. Mara kept drying her hands. If I didn't, he'd just try again. Nicole's voice softened. You're not thinking about the fallout. Word gets around you're willing to go physical off the books, and sooner or later, someone's gonna call you on it. Mara met her eyes in the mirror. Maybe that's the point. Nicole stared at her for a moment, then shook her head. Be careful, Mara. You're playing a game you can't win. That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She replayed the look on Rondo's face, the way it had shifted from defiance to calculation. She had won in that moment, but she knew he wasn't the type to let it go. She also knew something else. Part of her didn't care. She had done what she believed needed to be done, and it had worked. The next day, she learned just how high the cost might be. During her afternoon round, she passed the laundry room and saw the door ajar. Inside, Rondo was leaning against a dryer, talking to another boy. They stopped when they saw her, but not fast enough. She caught the glint of something in Rondo's hand before he slid it into his waistband. A blade, not big, but big enough. He smirked. Lost, Officer Hughes? She should have called for backup. She should have followed every line in the manual. But she didn't. Instead, she stepped inside and closed the door. The air was thick with the smell of detergent and something sharper tension. You planning to use that? She asked. Rondo's smirk didn't fade. Depends who's asking. She moved closer, slow and deliberate. Give it to me. He tilted his head. Make me. The moment stretched. She could feel her pulse in her throat. If she lunged for it, she might get cut. If she walked away, she'd be leaving a weapon in play. So she chose a third option. I know things about you, she said. Things that could make your time in here a lot worse. You want to test me, go ahead. But you won't like how it ends. Rondo studied her for a long moment, then pulled the blade from his waistband and dropped it into her hand. Guess we understand each other, he said. Walking out of the laundry room, the metal felt heavy in her pocket. Not because of its weight, but because of what it meant. She had beaten him, not by the rules, but by her own. And she realized, with a clarity that made her chest tight, that the rules no longer mattered to her the way they once had. The next week was quiet too quiet. No fights, no shouting matches, no late-night alarms. On paper, it was a good stretch. But Mara knew better. Silence in the detention center wasn't peace, it was a pause before the storm. She noticed it in the way Rondo didn't look at her anymore. He'd stopped smirking, stopped staring. He walked past her in the halls without a word. Jamal seemed calmer too, but there was a nervous edge in his voice when he spoke to her, like he was waiting for something. By Thursday, she learned what it was. Nicole caught up to her in the staff lounge, her voice low. Nicole, you know Jamal's been running errands for Rondo? Mara, what kind of errands? Nicole, passing notes, moving stuff around. Stuff he's not supposed to have. Mara's jaw tightened. He wouldn't do that, wouldn't? Or you don't want to believe he would? Nicole asked. Mara didn't answer. She confronted Jamal during afternoon rec. He was sitting on the bleachers watching a basketball game, but his eyes flicked away when he saw her approach. "You working for Rondo?" she asked. Jamal shook his head too fast. "No, I've heard otherwise." He looked down at his hands. "He said if I didn't, he'd make it worse than last time." "You can't watch me all the time, Mara." The way he said her name, no, Officer Hughes. No formal tone reminded her of when she first met him, when she'd thought she could protect him. "You should have told me," she said. "You think telling you fixes anything?" he asked. "You scare him, sure. But that just means he gets creative when you're not around." Her stomach turned. She'd made Rondo back down publicly, but in doing so, she'd painted a target on anyone she'd protected. That night, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the blade she'd taken from Rondo. It was still wrapped in a paper towel, hidden in the back of a drawer. She'd meant to get rid of it, but hadn't. Maybe because part of her liked knowing she had it, like proof she could win. But now the victory felt hollow. She wasn't fixing the system. She was just shifting the harm around. Friday afternoon, the shift took a darker turn. A guard from another wing stalked her in the hall. "Guard, hey, Hughes. You've got friends in high places, huh?" "Mara, what are you talking about?" "Guard, one of the kids in your wing says you look out for people as long as they look out for you. Says you can get stuff in for them if they stay on your good side." Mara felt the heat rise in her face. "Who said that?" He shrugged. "Didn't get a name. Just figured I'd warn you word spreading." It was the moment she realized how quickly influence could twist into suspicion. She hadn't smuggled anything for anyone, but she had taken matters into her own hands. And in a place where everyone watched and whispered, that was enough to build a story. When she walked the halls that night, she saw it in the kid's eyes: calculation, interest, a hint of something like recruitment. They didn't just fear her now. They were wondering if they could use her. The test came sooner than she expected. During Saturday's evening meal, a small, wiry kid named Ellis slid into line ahead of another boy. The other boy shoved him. Trays clattered, voices rose. Mara stepped in fast, grabbing Ellis by the arm to pull him aside. In the shuffle, something small dropped from his sleeve, a folded scrap of paper. She bent down, picked it up, and unfolded it. Inside was a crude map of the facility's west wing with a path marked in red. Her eyes shot to Ellis. "Where'd you get this?" He licked his lips. "Found it. Don't lie to me." He hesitated. "Rondo said to give it to you." The noise of the cafeteria faded to a low hum in her ears. "Why?" she asked. Ellis shrugged. "Said you'd know what to do with it." That night, she stared at the map under the dim light of her apartment kitchen. The red path ended at an exterior service door, the kind staff used for deliveries. It could be a joke, a setup, or a warning. Part of her wanted to burn it, pretend she'd never seen it. But another part, the part that had been growing louder, wanted to know if it was real, because if it was, It meant Rondo trusted her enough to hand her something that could get him out. Or he wanted to see if she'd take the bait. Either way, she couldn't shake the feeling that the game had changed, and she was no longer just a guard trying to keep order. She was a piece on someone else's board. The next morning, she slipped the map into her pocket before heading to work. She told herself it was just to keep it from falling into the wrong hands. But deep down, she knew she was crossing into dangerous territory. Because once you start carrying someone else's secrets, it's only a matter of time before they carry yours. Sunday morning brought a thick fog that clung to the fence around the detention center. Mara walked in early, the map in her pocket feeling heavier than her keys. She told herself she'd hand it over to the captain before lunch. That was the plan. But plans have a way of dissolving in places like this. Halfway through her shift, she saw Rondo standing at the far end of the hallway. He didn't move toward her, didn't even nod. Just stood there with his hands in his pockets, watching. When their eyes met, he tilted his head slightly, almost like a question. Mara didn't react. She kept walking, but her pulse quickened. By noon, she'd passed the captain's office twice without going in. The map was still in her pocket. She told herself she was being cautious. She wanted to see if it connected to anything first. But in truth, a darker thought was forming. If the map was real, she could use it. Not to help Rondo, not to let anyone escape, but maybe to get leverage. The idea unsettled her, but it didn't go away. That night, she stayed late to do paperwork in the empty break room. At 8:17 p.m., she heard the faint jingle of keys and footsteps in the hall. The cameras didn't cover this stretch well. She looked up to see Jamal in the doorway, eyes wide. "Jamal, he wants to talk to you. Now." "Mara." "Who?" "Jamal." "Rondo." Mara leaned back in her chair. "Tell him if he's got something to say, he can." "Jamal." "No, he said you would come to him." The way Jamal said it, quiet, urgent, made her stand. Rondo was waiting in the laundry room, leaning against a row of humming machines. The smell of detergent and heat hung in the air. "Rondo, you get my gift?" "Mara, gift?" "Rondo, map." She kept her face neutral. "What's it for?" "Rondo, same thing maps are always for. To get from one place to another." "You think I'm stupid enough to help you?" she asked. "Rondo, nah, you're smart. Smart enough to know that if I get out, things change around here. The right people get protected. The wrong ones stop breathing." Mara crossed her arms. "You're threatening me." "Rondo, I'm giving you an option. And before you say no, think about this. What happens when one of these kids puts a shank in your back? Or when Jamal gets jumped and you're not there? You think the system's gonna stop it. The system's broken, Hughes. But you could work around it." She wanted to walk away. Every part of her training told her to. But the thought of Jamal bleeding out in some corner hallway wouldn't leave her. "Mara, what's in it for you?" "Rondo, freedom." "Mara, and for me?" "Rondo, control." The word landed heavy. By the time she left the laundry room, she hadn't agreed to anything, but she hadn't said no either. And that was enough for the idea to root itself in her mind. 2 days later, an incident gave her the perfect excuse to test the map. A delivery truck was scheduled for the West Wing, exactly where the marked service door was. She volunteered for the escort shift. At 10:42 a.m., she found herself standing at the door. The lock was older, scratched from years of use. She turned the handle just to see, and it moved freely. She closed it fast, her heart pounding. The map was real. That night, she sat at her kitchen table with the map and a glass of cheap whiskey. She thought about the day she started here, full of rules and lines she swore she'd never cross. Now, the line was right in front of her, clear as day, and she was leaning over it. She could turn the map in, clear her conscience, and let the system keep grinding away. Or she could keep it, use it, maybe even play Rondo's game long enough to win something. She told herself she'd just keep it for now, for protection. But deep down, she knew she'd already made her choice. Wednesday morning, Jamal caught her near the rec yard. "Jamal, you got it, right?" Mara. "Got what?" Jamal. "The map. He said you'd keep it safe." Mara's chest tightened. "And if I don't?" "Jamal, then he'll give it to someone else. And they won't be looking out for you." It wasn't until that moment she realized the real trap. The map wasn't just a tool, it was a leash. As long as she had it, Rondo owned a piece of her. And the worst part? She wasn't sure she wanted to let go. The storm rolled in before dawn, slamming rain against the detention center's high windows. Inside, the air felt charged, like the place was holding its breath. Mara sat in the control room with the map tucked inside her jacket. She'd had it for 10 days now. 10 days of glancing at that service door on the West Wing every time she passed. 10 days of replaying Rondo's words in her head. Control. That morning, Rondo made his move. The alarms didn't go off. There were no shouts, no chaos, just a quiet, calculated absence of noise in the West Wing. When Mara checked the camera feed, one lens was covered with something black. The rest showed inmates milling around, acting normal. Except Rondo was gone from his usual spot. Her radio crackled with the captain's voice, sharp and clipped. "Captain, Unit C, report. Anyone seen Rondo?" Mara's pulse thudded in her ears. She could answer honestly, say she hadn't seen him, and keep herself clean. Or she could use this. She stood, leaving the control room without permission. The hallway to the West Wing was empty. Her boots echoed on the linoleum. When she reached the service door, she hesitated, hand hovering over the handle. One turn, and she could see whether Rondo had already slipped through. If he had, she could help or stop him. She turned it. The door creaked open into the damp smell of rain. The alley beyond was empty except for Rondo, standing halfway to the fence, hood pulled low. He froze when he saw her. "Rondo, you came." "Mara, you're not gone yet." "Rondo, give me 2 minutes and I will be." She glanced behind her. The hallway was still clear. Mara, if I let you walk out, what happens next? Rondo, you get what you've been missing. The respect, the safety, the say in how things run. Mara, and if I stop you? Rondo, then you're just another cog in the broken machine. Her fingers tightened on the doorframe. This was the point. The moment she'd told herself she'd never face. She stepped outside. The rain plastered her hair to her face. Mara, you don't run things without me. Rondo, then come with me. Her laugh was short and bitter. I'm not stupid enough to leave. Rondo, then you're smart enough to stay in and still hold the keys. She didn't stop him. She didn't help him either, not in any way that could be proved. She just watched as he reached the fence, tossed a bundled rope over, and climbed. By the time she closed the door and walked back inside, she'd already decided what she'd say if asked. I never saw him. The search lasted hours. The storm slowed everything. By nightfall, the captain was red-faced, barking orders. Mara kept her expression flat, her voice steady. But inside, something was shifting. When Jamal found her in the hallway, he was grinning like he'd just pulled off a magic trick. Jamal, he said you were solid. Said now we move different. Mara, what does that mean? Jamal, means people stop messing with us. Means you get to decide who gets breaks and who doesn't. 2 weeks later, it was true. Things were smoother. The tension in the yard dropped. Inmates who used to test her now stepped aside when she passed. But it wasn't free. Quiet favors started creeping in, small things at first. Extra minutes in the rec yard for certain people. Looking the other way when a package came through. And every time she thought about pushing back, she remembered the look Rondo gave her in the rain, like they shared a secret no one else could touch. Mara didn't wake up one morning and think, I'm corrupt now. It happened like water wearing down stone. One choice, then another. One bend of the rules that became normal. She still told herself she was doing it to keep the peace, to protect people like Jamal. But deep down, she knew the truth control felt good. It wasn't long before other officers noticed. A few avoided her. Others started coming to her for arrangements. She didn't accept them all, only the ones that made sense. The ones that kept her in charge. Months later, on a warm evening, she stood in that same West Wing hallway, staring at the service door. It was still scratched, still old. But now, it wasn't just an exit. It was a reminder of the day she stopped being just another guard and started being something else. Maybe Mara's story felt far away. Or maybe it felt a little too close. Either way, the question still stands. How many steps would it take for you? If this journey made you think differently about human nature, don't stop here. Watch our other stories, share this one, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because the line between good and evil is thinner than you think.